let's fast forward a few years to the young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Super fun. A heck of a big sound in that series. And sounds like you really had an opportunity to flex some chops and be able to just open up the palette. And, just kind of very quickly, before we pivot to a scene we'll look at here from the second season, The Phantom Train.
Okay.
You don't have that all that often anymore in television these days. And ironically enough, you're one of the few guys that still does, by going in and recording some of these bigger things, whether or not it's on American Dad or it's on the Orville. Having that kind of a recording orchestra for television, which was later edited, I believe, into, didn't Paramount or somebody later edit those into kind of like 20 different feature-length episodes?
Yeah, that was George's intent from day one. Was that the stories would all knit together as 2-hour movies. So from script conception, they were designed to go together.
Yeah. Before we take a look at this scene, The Phantom Train, how did this one come about? Because that's a big deal. You're really young at that point. George Lucas, few people knew who he was around the world. So how did that one come about for you?
It was life-changing, I had agents at Gorfain Schwartz who represent John Williams, and Lawrence Rosenthal was the initial composer that George hired to be the lead guy and to write the theme and everything. And they were looking for, I think George had requested kind of a young up-and-coming composer, and because I was at John Williams' agency, they went to John and asked him, and he went to the agents and said, "Who do you recommend?" They sent him some of my material, and he endorsed the idea of my getting to meet with George. So George came down to the Bel Air Hotel. I didn't know at the time I was the only young composer he was meeting with. I thought it was, I was going to go there and there'd be 30 guys waiting to see him, but it was just me. And we went in and we talked for well over an hour just about music and life, and fascinating man, and talked about art, kind of everything but the show. And then at the end, he told me the concept of the show, and that each show was to be its own movie score, and should be really redolent of the time and the place of the story. So if you were in Russia in the early teens, it was music of that time, and if you were in Africa, so on and so forth. So dream gig. I remember driving home and thinking, wow, that was really fun. I will never get this job. But that was really fun, spending an hour with George Lucas. And then I got a phone call, and they really in every single way changed my life.
Yeah. This scene we'll look at here, you can hear very quickly just how many styles you kind of move through in a very short amount of time. and that you can't do that unless you kind of have the chops to do it and the technique to do it. It does take technique to do these things. So let's have a look at this Phantom Train episode.
Hurry up!
So, as you can all hear out there, Joel has a lot of fun with the style in this, and you hear a lot of fun major, minor, seven chords and sevenths in the bass and all these fun things that are, kind of endemic to the period to some degree. Obviously, you had a lot of fun on this one, even if just this cue. I know it sounds like you had fun on the whole thing, and it was life-changing, as you said, but this scene is just so much fun.
It is. That whole show, The Phantom Train, was so much fun. It's directed by the great Ben Burt of Star Wars fame. Ben,
great audio man.
Among other things, the created all the sound for Star Wars, created the droids and the lightsaber sound, and an enormously gifted man and an enormously knowledgeable about film music. And he was actually one of the main people to do the temp dubs on Star Wars. So he brought his massive record collection in, and he and George would sit there and pick out some temp music. Yeah.
Well, that's
Ben
fun.
Burt, man.
Ben, I mean, it's amazing how many people he's saved over the years, projects that he's saved over the years. And, there's some legendary stories out there, but, it's just one of those, to your point earlier about kind of being born to do X, Y, Z. If he wasn't born to do that, I don't know what he was born to do, because he among all of the folks that are quite good at it too, he sticks out the most for me because he finds a way to tell story through sound design in a way that most people don't capture it. I mean, that's a difficult thing to do. And Wall-E was one of the great examples of that. I mean, the first 25 minutes of that movie, it was just sound design, and it's a story. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. There's so much expression that he gave to Wall-E's voice.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, that's fun, man. So, looking back, I mean, what are some of the things that you've taken from that experience on the Chronicles back in the early 90s that you may have that were kind of learning experiences, maybe one or two big learning experiences that you took from the project to kind of help a lot of our listeners are actually, kind of young up and coming folks in the industry. And, you're constantly learning we are in our careers. What did you learn on that one?
Well, I think the main thing was that in general, I feel like it takes a very long time to really become a thoroughly trained composer. And at the time, I think I started Young Indie when I was maybe 31 or 32. Yeah. I definitely wasn't done with my training. Now, that can be enormously scary if you're feeling like you're a surgeon going into the operating room and you're not sure which tool to pick up, So what I would do was I just studied my ass off. I would just get every single score I could look at and just kind of try and catch up, try and get the knowledge I needed. It wasn't until maybe 5, 6, 7 years later where I had written enough music that I thought, okay, I kind of know my way around this thing. At least I know my way around writing for the orchestra. I know my way around orchestration. And so I guess the takeaway from it was, no matter how intimidating and no matter how unprepared you feel, know that probably most people feel that way going into a job, and it's part of it. And so the only way to combat against that is incredibly thorough preparation. Just do your homework. And I think that also goes back to your training. I mean, I think so many people are bypassing, important parts of training now, which, learning canons and fugues, starting with Bach, learning to write counterpoint. I mean, learn the building blocks and the foundation of the building before you build the building.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Technology certainly helped to muddy the water, so to speak. From an education standpoint. But there's an argument to be made there, though, that the technology part of it is also part of the education, particularly in this industry. But you're right. It's the building blocks, and I have conversations with young composers from time to time when I'm on the road conducting, and a lot of them, and frighteningly so, couldn't tell you who, Von Bingen was, or Michaud, or, I mean, like really early music that was prior to even the building blocks in Western music we might consider Bach and beyond. And you're right, it's hard to know what to do with the roof before you've laid the concrete. So anyhow, 1994, the next year,